Hello, I'm Doug Watches. Welcome to the Locksmith DVD training program. In this course, we're going to continue looking at high security locks. We'll focus on Schlage's Everest, Everest 29, Primus and Primus XP locks. However, since Schlage has a huge presence in both residential and commercial locks, I want to take this opportunity to present additional information about the Schlage company and their locks. The focus will be on the Schlage's mechanical commercial locks, as we have discussed the residential locks in previous courses. We will not be able to cover electronic locks in this course. Also, we will not be able to cover every mechanical lock and every feature. The plan is to present enough information that you will have a good understanding of the Schlage high security locks and feel comfortable working on the locks, and also to conduct further research on your own. Also, this course includes a bonus section. At the very end is a review of the history of the Schlage company, which you may find interesting. This course is divided into 13 parts. Part 1, Schlage keyways. Part 2, key blank identification. Part 3, Schlage classic locks. Part 4, Everest locks. Part 5, Everest 29 locks. Part 6, Primus and Primus XP locks. Part 7, decode and rekey a Primus lock. Part 8, rekey an Everest 29 to an Everest lock. Part 9, dealing with a lost Primus key. Part 10, Schlage's commercial locks. Part 11, Schlage's service manuals. Part 12, review and practice. And Part 13 is a bonus section on the history of Schlage. Okay, here we have a classic Schlage cylinder. This is interchangeable core, full-size interchangeable core Schlage with the Everest keyway. This is from a deadbolt, again with Everest. This is the Everest keyway, often referred to as Legacy Everest. And here we have the Everest 29, and this lock includes the Primus system, which includes the sidebar in it. So as we get going through this course, we're going to try to present enough information that by the end of the course, everyone is going to be comfortable with working on these locks. Now, we've already covered the classic lock at length, so we're not going to talk about it too much, although it is upgradable to XP, so we are going to talk about this classic lock some. We've already covered the interchangeable core lock in course number 14, so I'm not going to get into that too much. Our primary goal here is to present information on the Everest, Everest 29, Primus, and Primus XP systems. But we have had a lot of questions, people asking us to go into more detail about all of the Schlage locks that are available. And so we are going to present information not just on these topics, but also on other Schlage locks and classes or series of locks that are available, and try to give information on the differences and also how to select different locks for different uses. In general, the course objectives for this course will be: 1. Be able to explain the Schlage key families. 2. Be familiar with the Schlage Classic, Everest, and Everest 29 key blanks. 3. Be familiar with the Schlage Classic, Everest, and Everest 29 locks. 4. Understand the Schlage Primus and Primus XP locks and features. 5. Be able to decode the side milling on a Primus XP key. 6. Be able to recognize Primus and Primus XP finger pins. 7. Without a key, be able to remove the plug from a Primus lock. 8. Know the patent protections for Everest 29 and Primus XP. And 9. Be familiar with Schlage's commercial locks and service manuals. Now, as we go through this course, I'm going to be referring to a number of the Schlage manuals. And if you don't have these manuals, would suggest that you try to pick these up, because they're going to come in handy in learning how to service these locks. First one I have here is the Schlage Key System Cylinders and Keys, the reference guide. I'll be referring to this extensively. And we have Schlage Primus service manual, Everest full-size cylinder service manual, the Schlage Key Systems answer book. Also in this course, I want to go over one of the service manuals. I've chosen the one for the D series locks, and the purpose of this is just so you will be familiar with what kind of information is available in one of these service manuals. Before looking at the high security features of Schlage locks, I want to take a few minutes and briefly look at the characteristics of each of the three major keyways currently offered by Schlage. One of the things that is confusing about Schlage locks is the keyways, and that's the first topic I want to address. What causes confusion is not knowing which keyways go to which locks, and then being able to identify the keyway, and also the fact that some of the locks have some restricted keyways. So I want to try to clear all of that up as we go through this course. Schlage's original locks have become known as Schlage's classic locks, and that's what I have right here as an example of a classic lock that we're all familiar with. In the classic locks, the C keyway was the most common of the open keyways. The SC1 key blank is probably one of the two most popular key blanks in North America. Now there were other open keyways, and I'll list those for you later. Schlage refers to these classic locks open keyways as obverse. Now Schlage also offered D keyways, which are restricted keyways. So within the original classic locks, there were basically two subfamilies of keyways, C and D. I want to take just a minute and make some notes as we're going through this. So the classic family of keyways, we had C, which were open, and they were called and are called obverse keyways. And then we had restricted, which was the D subfamily. In November of 1998, Schlage began to produce a small format IC core lock with a new patented keyway called Everest Legacy, commonly referred to as just Everest. This small format lock was the same style as the best style of small format interchangeable core locks, and the Schlage lock was compatible with that group of standard SFIC locks. The Everest keyway for the small format lock was designated B, and it is a restricted keyway. Now Schlage does offer the small format in some open keyways, but right now I'm just concerned about the B keyway. Now this new Everest keyway was integrated into the full-size locks also, but they kept the same letter designations as the classic locks, C and D. So within the Everest keyway family, there are three subfamilies, B, C, and D. The most common of the open key blanks for Everest is designated C123. So Everest is the second family of keyways that you're going to encounter, and within Everest you have the subfamilies of B, C, and D. B being the small format IC core, D is restricted, and then C being the open keyway. Now in 2012, Schlage released what is known as the Everest 29 keyway. And it's patent protected until 2029, and we'll talk more about the patents on these later. But with the Everest 29, the subfamilies B, C, and D became R, S, and T. So that means whenever we come across a Schlage lock, we need to be able to determine which family and then subfamily the lock fits into. With Everest 29, the R and T subfamilies are still restricted keyways, just like the B and D were in Everest. S is the open keyway, and the most common of the blanks is the default key, which they assigned S123. RT and S are backward compatible with Everest B, C, and D keyways. Okay, so we're going to add those to our note card here, and we can see this completes the families and subfamilies of keyways that are out there for Schlage. Again, with Everest 29, which was released in 2012, and so there's getting to be quite a few of those already. We have the B became R for the small format IC core. C became S and D became T, and these are the full size locks. So the B was restricted and the R is still restricted. It's a restricted keyway in the Everest 29. The D was restricted in Classic and Everest, and the T is a restricted keyway in Everest 29. The default keyway for Everest was C123. That's mostly what distributors were going to stock on their shelves for sale as an open keyway. And with the Everest 29, it became the S123. Now, in addition to these keyway families, we also have a feature which is called Primus. Originally, it was called Primus, and there's a new one out that's called Primus XP. The Primus feature is not a keyway. It's a sidebar that's in here. It does have additional side milling on the key here, but it does not change the profile of the key. So it's not considered to be a different keyway. You can find the Primus in any of these keyways here. It is available as an upgrade in the old Classic locks. It's in the Everest and in the Everest 29. You will not see the Primus feature in the Everest or Everest 29 small format IC core, primarily because with the small format lock, the plug fits into a shell that's just too thin to add this feature to. But again, you're going to have all of these keyways and then with or without Primus. So I'll just make a note here. Originally, again, it was called Primus. And then today, the new one is Primus XP. And we're going to go over all of this in this course. And then in addition to this, you can get these cylinders with a UL 437 rating, which includes the hardened steel pins that will give them drill resistance. Now, I know this is a lot to grasp, and I will mention most of these points several times during the course. It may be necessary to view some parts of the course more than once. Now, I want to make sure that everyone is familiar with the standard markings on the Schlage keys, and we're going to look at those next. Okay, as we get started looking at Schlage locks, I want to take just a minute and look at a few of the key blanks. And we're going to just look at the markings on the keys right now, and then as we go through the course, I'm going to talk more about some of the features of the keys. But this is the Schlage Classic key, and that's one that I'm sure everyone is familiar with. These two in the middle have to do with the Schlage Everest keyways, and you can see that they're quite a bit larger than the Classic key. This is the Schlage Everest, and this is an Everest Primus. Then we have here the Everest 29. And the Everest 29 is a little bit larger at the bow section. It's rounded. It has a hole in it here. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the classic Schlage key. Schlage engraved on one side of the key. On the other side, you have the cuts of the key, and it's marked with a C for the C keyway. This blank goes to an Everest lock with an Everest keyway. You can see the Everest emblem here. It's a mountain-like emblem. Again, the name Schlage stamped on the front of the key. Then on the back of the key, we have a C123, which identifies this keyway. And then there's a symbol here. This is actually a symbol for the guy that invented this particular system, Bo Wyden, that developed this system of locks and licensed them to Schlage. So if you see this on there, this is not the mountain symbol. That's a little bit different. It has a W on here, and it's, again, that's for Bo Wyden. Okay, again, this is an Everest keyway, but it's for a Primus. Schlage, Primus, do not duplicate, patented, and the Everest symbol. On the back of the key, there's a number here which identifies the side milling of the key. Here's a close-up of the C123, the identification number for the Primus, the Bo Wyden symbols here. This is a close-up here of the Everest 29 key. You can see the Everest symbol, says Schlage, has the patent number. Also, something a little different about this key is this trapezoid-like hole right at the top of the blade. And this hole was put here to facilitate in the milling process, in the milling of the undercut that's part of this keyway. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the classic Schlage lock with the C keyway. The C keyway has been around since 1935, and since the C keyway has been considered an open keyway, it is the most popular keyway in the Schlage lock family. If we look at the ILCO key directory, we can see the profile here for the SC1, and again, the cuts of the key would be right here. And of course, if it's a 6-pin key, then it'd be an SC4. And you should be able to recognize this profile. It is so common in North America that it is just one of the keyways that we should be able to recognize. These are the keyways that are available for the classic conventional cylinders. Most common, of course, is C. These other ones are available. If you were doing a large master key system, you might need additional cylinders. And you can see there are C, E, E, F, 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 G, and G. You have H, J, and K for submasters, and the top master you can go with the L. So these keys, like a C, will not fit in the CE. The CE will not fit the E. However, this H key will fit all three of these. This L key will fit all of them. They also have this keyway here is a P keyway. And this is designed so that all of these keys will fit this. So you may have a master key system where there's one room, say the break room, and the easiest way to deal with that room is just put one of these on here and make all of these keys fit that cylinder. But that P keyway is available. It is possible to upgrade the classic locks to Primus, and these are the keyways that are available if you do the upgrade. This upgrade from classic to Primus changes the lock from just a regular lock to a high security lock. You have a patented keyway. This is protected through 2024. You have pick resistance, and you have the option of ordering this in the 437 rated plugs, which would give you drill resistance. Schlage does offer a D family of keyways which are restricted. The keyway for each restricted D family job is selected by Schlage and registered to the end user. Restricted key blanks, cut keys, cylinders, and plugs are shipped directly to the end user. All orders require written authorization. One of the easiest ways to tell if a key blank is an open key blank or an open keyway is to look in one of the aftermarket key blank manufacturers' directories and see if they list it in there. If they are offering the key blank for sale to the public, then you know it's not a patented keyway. So we're going to look in here at the Jet catalog so I can demonstrate that. If we look in the cross-reference section of the book, there's normally a cross-reference that will give the manufacturer's original numbers. And so you look there, for example, here looking at Schlage, we can see that here's the original number, Schlage 35100C, and they have it twice. It's the same keyway, but there's something different about the key. And if we come over here, we can see with the Jet number 100 CDDNS and then 100 CNS, the DD is the do not duplicate. So that's why it's listed twice. And if we come back over here, we can see here's an E keyway, F, L, then here's your C 6-pin, CE 6-pin, E 6-pin, and so on. And you can come right on down through here and you can see the other keyways, E, F, 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 G, G, H, and L. So because those are listed here in this catalog and this supplier is offering these blanks and these keyways, you can feel pretty sure that these are open keyways. In November of 1998, Schlage introduced its new Everest keyway, and it was introduced into a lock that was compatible with the best small format IC core locks. Although the Everest keyway was first introduced into the small format IC core, they were immediately also put into the full-size Schlage locks. Two things were different about this key when comparing it to the Schlage Classic key. First, there was a dramatic difference in the shape of the key right here. There was an undercut groove that was added, and this piece that's left here on the side of the key was used to operate pins inside the locks. So that with the Everest locks, there's an extra pin called a check pin in the lock, and this piece that's left here on the edge of the key or the side of the key would operate the check pin. Looking at the plug, and we can see the profile here, we can see this undercut portion as it's part of the plug assembly here. And again, the one part of the key here would work the check pin. And also here in the manual, we can see that they point out this one part of the key on the side of the key is what is going to lift the check pin out of the hole so that it'll be free from the shell and the plug can rotate. And then on all of the Everest keys, you're going to notice that there's going to be a little part here that's been taken out from the side milling, and that is primarily to prevent people from using these Everest keys to make their own Everest Primus keys. Here in the Schlage manual, they have a drawing that illustrates the hole in the shell that would hold the check pin. So this view here shows all of the changes made to the locks that were needed for the Everest keyways. Now you still had your standard bottom pin, and then if you wanted master pin, top pins, and so on in your springs, you had the standard pin stack was still a part of the lock. Here it shows the key and the part that's going to lift the check pin, and then here is the check pin, and the check pin will have its own spring. This view shows in the locked position that the normal pins are not at the shear line and the check pin is not picked up. The check pin is still recessed into the hole in the shell. And in the other view here, where the key's inserted, the regular pin stacks are now at the shear line, and you can see that this little part on the edge of the key has grabbed the finger on the check pin and lifted it so that it is no longer down inside the shell. So that basically shows the differences that came with the new Everest keyway. You can see the undercut groove here. This is the side milling on the right side of the key. This part right here will raise the check pin, which I'll show you in just a minute. This is a key-in lever lock with the Everest keyway. Notice the Everest symbol on the plug. You can see the back of the plug is stamped C123, which is the designation for this keyway. You can see the hole on the bottom side of the lock showing the check pin. The check pin enters this hole, and the lock will not be able to turn without something raising this check pin out of this hole. That's where the side milling on the right side of the key comes into play. This piece right here on the side of the key raises the check pin. If you watch the check pin, you'll see it go down. It just pushed it down. So now the plug can turn. Of course, you have to have a key that fits the other 6 pins in the lock also. Okay, we'll go ahead and pull this plug out so we can see the check pin. As long as the key's in there, it's going to hold the check pin in there. So here's the check pin right here. It's much like a finger pin, except there's no gate on the back of it. And of course it has its own spring. Here's a little closer look at the check pin. This is a full-sized IC core, again with the Everest keyway. Again, you can see the hole for the check pin. In the Everest family, the small format IC core was assigned a B keyway, which is restricted and does require a letter of authorization. So both the B and D keyways are restricted. Okay, now with the new Everest 29, they have changed this profile right here. This undercut is deeper. If you compare it back to the Everest, looking right here, you'll notice that this looks different. And so that this Everest key will not go into this Everest 29 keyway because of the way this is cut. The 29 key is backward compatible and still will fit into the Everest. So I'm going to do a close-up here. If you'll just look at this little undercut part right here. Again, this is the Everest, and this is the Everest 29. It is a subtle difference, but if you study that, you will be able to recognize the Everest 29 from the Everest keyway. This is a deadbolt with the Everest 29 keyway. Now this is the new undercut groove. Even in the Everest 29 keyway, we still see the side milling for the check pin. You can see the side milling here for the Everest check pin. You can see the Everest 29 profile here. It looks much like the Everest profile, but it is different. And the Everest or the Legacy Everest keys will not fit in this keyway that's made for the Everest 29. You can see that this is an Everest Primus, but that doesn't matter. It's an Everest keyway. The Everest 29 key will go in there, and it can be keyed up to that just fine. If you do it the other way around, you take the Everest key, it goes in, but you can see that here it will not go in to this Everest 29 keyway. So the Everest 29 keys can be used for the Everest locks, but not the other way around. We'll pull this plug out of this cylinder. And we can see the check pin right there. This is an Everest 29 keyway. It has the Everest emblem on it. And on the back of the plug you can see it says S123, which is the designation for this keyway. Okay, as we begin our discussion of this Schlage Primus lock, I'm going to be referring to the service manual quite a bit to try to explain these different features. So I'm going to show the different parts of the lock, and then I will show how they are explained in the service manual, and we'll go through that and try to understand how the thing works. And then once we've done that, I will rekey a key to fit this lock, and you will see that process. And hopefully by the end of both of those sections, you'll have a good understanding of how this lock works. If we look on the front of the plug, we can see that it has the emblem for the Everest keyway, and it also says Primus on it. So this is a high security lock with the Primus system. It's going to have a sidebar in here just like we saw in the Medico. Now, the way they operate the sidebar is different from the way that the Medico operated, but we're going to take this apart. We'll see all the parts and see how it works, and you'll be able to service these locks once we get through with this portion of the course. Now with the Primus key, we can see more milling than what we have on just a standard Everest or Everest 29 key. And we have milling here to work 5 pins. The pins that the side milling operates are called finger pins, and the finger pins are what operate the sidebar. Okay, here's a close-up of an actual Primus key, and after I go through all of the characteristics, we will rekey this key, we'll decode this key and make it fit a Primus lock. You'll need a holder if you want to. It makes it a lot easier anyway to get the key back out and something to hold your lock. But the plug holder that you'll need will need to have a sidebar groove in it. So if you happen to have a holder that you use for automotive locks, it may work. But without that groove in there allowing that sidebar to expand a little bit, the key will not want to come out. I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart. We're going to look at the parts inside, see what's in there, and then we'll look at the parts in some detail. You want to remember to hang on to the sidebar just like we did with the Medico. As we take that out, we can see here's the sidebar. It's got 2 springs, one on each end. These are the pins here. These are our bottom pins, just like we find in other full-size Schlage locks. I went ahead and took out the pins. The bottom pins are gone. And if I bring this around about 45 degrees, we can see that the sidebar is still there. And so if you rotate it around and the sidebar comes up, you want to be prepared to grab that. Going the other way, we can bring it around and we can see our finger pins are here. But you can see that some are straight out with the just perpendicular to the key. They're straight and perpendicular, and some are not. We have a situation where the pins can be turned either right or left to be straight ahead, which would be center. Now the way that Schlage accomplishes this is with the cuts in the key. I'm going to go ahead and take those out so we can see those, and then like I said, we'll talk about all of these components more as we go through the course. So I'm going to just grab that sidebar and take it out of there, take the lock out, and I'm going to drop that sidebar off right here. That's it. We'll look at it again more in a bit. And there are 2 springs, one on each end, just like we saw with the Medico. We'll tap those out of there. One doesn't want to come out. Okay, we'll grab him and get him out. So we got the springs out. Now the springs for the sidebar are different from the other springs in the lock. You have the springs for the sidebar, the springs for the finger pins, and then the springs for the top pins. So there's 3 different springs for this lock. Now then, again, the finger pins have their own springs, so they are spring loaded and they will pop out of there if you give them a chance. So I'm going to go ahead and take out one of the finger pins so we can get a look at it. And also, its spring came out. And again, you can see that the springs are different. This is the sidebar spring, this is the finger pin spring, and then as I mentioned, the spring for the top pins is larger than both of these. So here's the gate. It's cut into the back of the finger pin. If it's lined up right, then they will mate together, and the sidebar can slide into the gate of the finger pin and recess into the plug. Of course, all 5 of the finger pins have to be lined up with all 5 of the slots in the sidebar. I'm going to put the number 5 finger pin back in its chamber, and the spring's in there, so you notice that it wants to stay up. It can be pushed down, and again, if you're not careful, it will go flying off if you're doing that. And then if I put the key in, you'll notice that, again, I have to hold it down a little bit for it to catch properly, but it pulls it down. We can see that with the key in the plug that it is pulled down. I'm going to go ahead and pull the key back, and you will see it come up right there and back down again. Okay, now I've turned the plug so that we can see the slot where the sidebar goes, and I only have, again, the one finger pin in the number 5 slot, and I have the key in there so you can see the gate right there in the finger pin. And if I take the key out, now you see that there's no way that the sidebar can be recessed into the plug because the gate is not matched up with the slot in the sidebar. Okay, here's a diagram of the Primus sidebar. Here's the sidebar. There's 2 little springs, one on each end. Here are the finger pins. There's 5 finger pins. Each finger pin has its own spring. The finger pins are worked by the milling. As the key goes in, it will pick these finger pins up to the proper height to allow the sidebar to recess into the plug. Now, of course, there's a regular pin stack also in addition to the sidebar pins. Here's a diagram illustrating the finger pin being lifted by the side milling of the key. There's a gate in the back of the finger pin that the sidebar will slide into. If it's not picked up to the right height, the gate will not be there and the sidebar cannot recess. Now you'll notice in this top view of these finger pins, it shows the little gate for each one of them, and they have to be turned, of course, correctly for the sidebar to slide in there. Now, what's going to turn them? This one's turned this direction, this one's going this way, this one's this way, this one's straight ahead, and that one's turned off in that direction. Now, looking at the key in the service manual, and we see this side milling, which is the characteristic of the Everest and the Everest 29 keys, along with when you see all of these different grooves, you know we're dealing with a Primus sidebar also, which is part of this side milling. We need to learn how to read or decode this milling just like we learned to decode the standard key cut milling on the top of the key blank. And to understand this milling, it's not that difficult once you understand the main concept of how Schlage was trying to manipulate the pins. As we saw in the Medico, the bottom of the pins were chiseled off and the key was cut at a specific angle to raise and turn the pins to a position that would allow the sidebar to work. Schlage has a slightly different concept, and it's the placement of the groove in the milling that actually turns the pin to position it correctly. So if we could think of each one of these low spots, or the bottom of the cut, and there's five finger pins that work the sidebars, but the cuts will be either dead center or they'll be slightly towards the bow or slightly towards the tip. And by moving the cut slightly, they're able to turn the finger pin to the correct position to make it work with this particular milling. And we have to be concerned about 2 measurements here. One is if it's a shallow cut or a deep cut, and then secondly, the position of the cut. The way they turn the finger pins is by moving the cut a little bit. So, for example, let's just say that the center of this first chamber is here, and the deepest part of the cut is slightly to the left of center. Then it would turn the pin to the left. It'd be a left finger pin. It'd be turned back towards the bow. Do another example. Let's say that this is the center of this cut, and the lowest part of the cut is to the right of center. That's going to turn the finger pin to the right or towards the tip of the key. So those are the two things. One, is it a shallow or deep cut? And then secondly, is the lowest part of the cut right in the center of the chamber, or is it moved to the left or to the right? In this graphic, we can see in this illustration left, center, right, left, and then right, that if you notice here, they're trying to illustrate that if you have a right and left right next to each other, the cuts are going to be real close together because they've moved one cut to the right and they've moved one cut to the left. Okay, now when we look at how deep the cut is, there are two possibilities for each pin. Again, shallow and deep. Shallow and deep, shallow and deep. So for the standard Everest Primus lock, you have these 6 possible cuts. Now if the pin is left center, it's not turned left or right, it's a center pin. Notice that these cuts are not as deep as the ones that are turned. So that's a difference to be aware of. And this is the reason that I like to, when I'm decoding a key, I want to look first and see if the cuts are left, right, or center. And then once I know if they're left, right, or center, I know what to look for as far as the depth of the cut. And it's helpful to know that when you're trying to determine shallow or deep. Now in the newest lock, the Primus XP, there's another pin. And it's a right finger pin. And in every Primus XP lock, you're going to find at least one of these pins, a number 7 pin. Notice that it's much shallower than the 3 or the 1 or the 5, and this cut is referred to as extra shallow. So this will only occur in right fingered pins. So if you have a center cut or you have a left cut, you don't need to be concerned about a number 7 pin. But if it's a right cut, then you're going to have to determine if it's extra shallow, shallow, or deep to determine which pin you will need for that position. And again, that's in the Primus XP locks. Okay, you'll notice here that the gate here is too low. It's not lined up with the other 3. It looks straight and perpendicular and correct as far as using a left finger pin, which they have here, but they chose a pin for a shallow cut, and this is a deep cut. It should be a number 2 pin. Here we can see that the gate is not lined up properly. So they have a right pin here, and that's not going to be correct. It's either a center pin or a left pin, but it's not the right pin because the right pin is not lining it up correctly. It also looks too high, doesn't it? So it's wrong for 2 reasons. Now to read the finger pins, if they're left, center, or right, you grab them with a pair of tweezers by the gate. Then you hold the pin so that you're looking down with the pin straight away from you, with the finger being the farthest away from you. So then as you hold the pin, if the finger part of the pin is to the left, now again, this is with the, look at the tweezers and make sure the tweezers are going straight down as close as you can. Hold it straight up and down with the tweezers. And then if the finger part of the pin is to the left, it's a left pin. If the finger part of the pin is straight up, it's a center pin. And if the finger part of the pin is to the right, it's a right finger pin. So I've grabbed the little finger pin with my tweezers by the gate on the back of the pin, and then I turn it so the finger part of the pin is away from me. So you can see that with the tweezer straight down, that is a right finger pin. The finger is definitely leaning towards the right. Okay, so here's the milling on the side of the key. We have some cuts that are obviously deeper than others. Now, if it's a deeper cut, it is not going to push the pin as far up into the plug. So the slot would have to be further away from the tip of the finger in order to line up. If it's a more shallow cut here, the pin's going to be higher up. So the slot on the pin would have to be closer to the finger on the pin. Now the way that the pins are labeled as either deep cuts or shallow cuts has to do with the cut here. So if it's a deep cut, the pin's a deep cut. If it's a shallow, it's a shallow cut. And that's the simplest way to think about the pins as far as being shallow or deep, is to simply look at the cuts on your key. Going back to our drawing with the deep cut pins and shallow cut pins, a shallow cut is going to push the pin further up into the lock. A deep cut is not going to push it as far. So a shallow cut, the gate on the pin has to be lower down towards the finger because it's getting pushed a lot more with the shallow cut. With a deep cut, it's not being pushed as far. So to make these all come out equal, the gate on the pin has to be higher up, farther away from the finger on the pin. Coming back to the service manual, they have a reference that you can look at in the Primus service manual that shows this small difference between the deep and the shallow cuts. And then you can see here on the center cuts that in reference to the left and the right pins, you'll see that there's a little bit of white space in there, that this cut is not the same as this cut. And that's what I was trying to show on the other page in the manual, that the 2 and the 6 will be the same, the 1 and the 5. The 3 and the 4 are different from. The 4 is not the same depth as the 2 and the 6. The 3 is not the same as the 1 and the 5. And of course then the 7 is the shallowest. But that's why I try to calculate first if I'm dealing with a left, right, or center pin, because then once I know that, it's fairly easy anyway, to figure out if it's shallow or deep as far as the cut. You can see that there are 7 different finger pins, the number 7 being the new one that was added to get the Primus XP patent. So you'll notice that they have number 1 and 2, we have long left shallow and then left deep. 3 and 4 center shallow, center deep. 5 and 6 is right shallow and right deep. And then number 7 is a right, it's going to be on the facing to the right, and it's going to be more shallow than the other ones. And the part numbers, the Schlage part numbers for these are here. Now if you want to service Primus locks, you will need the finger pins. And you can buy a finger pin kit. They run around $240 to $260 normally for a set of pins and also a couple of tools. Now another option, if you want to just get a few pins to work with some sidebar locks, some Primus locks, you can buy the pins for about 60 cents a piece. Now there's only 7 pins, so if you buy 4 or 5 pins of each one, you're looking only about $20. And you can use the tools that you already have probably to begin working on the Primus locks. So that's another option. if you don't want to go ahead and invest in the finger pin kit. Okay, now to build your lock back, the first thing you want to do is put your springs in to the chambers where the finger pins go. Here you can see the plug with all of the finger pins out, the springs are out, and you want to put the finger pins back in and just put your spring in first, like so. Then you just put the finger pin in over the spring. It's like that. Do all 5 and then you can put your key back in to hold them. You can see here, so I push it down, you can see the gate in the back of the finger pin. And that's what's going to line up with the slot in the sidebar. There's in the correct position right there. So with all 5 finger pins in there, I can put the key back in. You have to push each one of the finger pins down for the key to catch it. And if we look back at the sidebar gap, now you can see that all 5 gates are turned the correct way and they're all at the correct height to accept the sidebar. Now I haven't put the springs in yet. I'm going to just demonstrate that the sidebar would fit in there at this point. So you see it goes all the way in. Of course we have to put our 2 little springs in before we put it back in the lock. Okay, so we'll put our springs in. When I build these locks back, I always do it in this order so that I can see everything is correct as I'm going. So the springs are in there, and then we can take the sidebar and we can see that the sidebar will press all of the way into the plug. Now I'm ready to put it back into the plug holder. With the key in there, it'll hold the finger pins in place, so all I have to do really is just hang on to the sidebar, put my top pins or my bottom pins back in, make sure they're flush, and the lock will be ready to go together. Okay, with all of the bottom pins back in, it's nice and flush, just like it's supposed to be. You can see that it will turn around into the plug. I can take it out. Remember to hold on to the sidebar as you do that, and put your lock back together. That's it. That's all there is to it. Okay, I'm going to do 2 rekeys for you. I'm going to rekey this Primus. I have a different Primus key that doesn't work this lock, and we're going to rekey this lock so that this Primus key will work it. And then I'm going to take the Primus or the Everest 29, and I'm going to key it back to an Everest cylinder. Okay, then we have here just the empty plug, and we have a key. We're going to put the key in the plug. We'll put it here in the holder so it will hold it for us. Now these are the finger pin chambers here. And I'm going to put a mark the best I can right in the middle of each of these finger pin chambers. Like so. Okay, I've taken my pen and brought the marks on around to the side of the key so we can see how they line up with the side milling. And if you look at number one is in the center of the lowest spot of the cut. Number 2 is not. Number 2, the mark is here, and the lowest part of the cut is to the right. On number 3, the lowest part is to the left. In number 4 and number 5, you can see that it's pretty centered. So that it appears that the cut on number 2 is to the right. The lowest part of the cut is to the right of the center point going towards the tip. And number 3 is to the left of the center point going back towards the bow. 1, 4, and 5 are center. So that would tell us that the pins that we need for this key would be, we're going to need three pins that are center, and we're going to need 1 pin that is right and 1 pin that is left. Okay, so what we know so far about our finger pins is that we have 3 that are center pins, 1 that is a right pin, and 1 that is a left pin. Now we're going to look and see if we have deep or shallow pins. Now the next question will be, are they shallow, are they deep, or in the case if we have a Primus XP, is one of these cuts extra shallow? So the ones that are deep, number 2 is deep, and number 4 is deep. 3 is kind of hard to tell, but it's more shallow. 1, 3, and 5 are shallow. So 2 and 4 are deep, and these are shallow. Okay, now we've studied the cuts on our side milling here, and we've determined if the cuts are center, right, or left, and we've determined if they're shallow or deep. So all we need to do now is to look in the reference book and determine the number of the pin. We know that number 1 we said was a center cut, and we said it was shallow. And we can look at it right there and we can see, yes, that is a shallow cut and it is center, and so it's going to be one of these. If it's a center cut, it's got to be a 3 or a 4. And if it's shallow, 3 would be the right selection. So that's number 1 would be a 3 pin. Number 2 we said was to the right, and we said that it's deep. And again, we can see right here that it is a deep cut. So it's going to be to the right, it's going to be one of these pins here, 5 or a 6. Since it's deep, it'll be a number 6 pin. Number 3 was to the left, and we said that it was shallow, and we can look at that and confirm, yeah, that's shallow. It's to the left, it's going to be a 1 or a 2. Shallow is the 1. And number 4 we said was center and deep, so it has to be number 4. If it's a center cut, it has to be 3 or 4. Deep is 4. The last one, number 5, we said was center and shallow. Again, it's 3 or 4, and 3 is the shallow one. So now we have the selection for our pins, 3, 6, 1, 4, and 3. We can pull those pins and we can pin our lock. Okay, I put all of the springs and the finger pins in their 5 chambers. So we're loaded up here at 3, 6, 1, 4, and 3. Again, that's 3, 6, 1, 4, 3. And the the next thing to do is to put the sidebar in it. Now the way I normally do it, I'll take just like I'm showing here, I'll put the finger pins in, put the key in to hold the finger pins down and lock them into the plug. And then I'll turn it around to where the sidebar goes, and I'll load the sidebar. So we have 2 little springs. We have to drop our little sidebar springs, 1 on each end, and then just put our sidebar in there. Okay, so here's 1. Then the other one. And we put the sidebar in. Now we can pretty much look at this point and see if all of the finger pins look like they're lined up correctly, so that the slot on the back of the finger pin should be lined up to go into the gap on the sidebar. Okay, so just take your sidebar. Doesn't matter which way it goes in. It can be switched either way. It's the same both ways. Push it on in there, and go ahead and just turn it around so that it's locked in with the plug. Now on these standard pins, the standard cuts on the key for the Classic, the Everest, and the Everest 29, those use the same pin kit, and we measure the cuts the same way with the same gauge that you've always used. So in rekeying this particular key to the Primus, we're going to have a 4, an 8, a 7, 7, 5, and another 4. So you measure those just like you always have. Pins were 4, 8, 7, 7, 5, 4. So I'm going to load those in. So I've dropped in all my pins, my lower pins are in here. I can see that they're flush. And by loading the lock the way I do it here, I put in the finger pins, put the key in, put the sidebar in, and turn it. I know that the sidebar is working properly because it had to recess so it could go into this plug. And then I can see that my top pins are all lined up flush, and I know the lock is keyed up right. Now when you go to pull it out of the plug, remember to hang on to the sidebar like so, and then just take your lock. Now remember, there is a gap horizontal across this plug, and you don't want to line that up with those top pins, that they can shoot down in there and cause problems. So make sure that the gap in the end of the plug is not lined up right over the top pins. Go ahead and lock it in position, take it out, and put your tailpiece on and lock it in there. But again, this gap right here. But if you go to put your, Schlage does have a follower that will fit in there and fill that gap in. But if you're not using one like that, and you just have one that goes like so, you don't want to have that gap lined up underneath your top pins. But that's it. That's all there is to it. Put the tailpiece back on, and we have rekeyed that, both the side pins and the bottom pins. And you know, if we wanted to master key it, we could have went ahead and master keyed it. Master keys like all of the other Schlage locks. Works fine. Okay, so this is our Everest 29 lock, and we're going to rekey this to this Everest. See, it won't turn it now, but I want to just show you that we can rekey it very simply to make it work that lock. Okay, so we're going to measure the cuts for the Everest 29 key, just like we always do. We have an 8. We have a 3, we have a 7, we have a 5, 4, and 7. Okay, so I pulled the pins to rekey that to 837547. We have to put the check pin in. Normally I would put the check pin in before I drop the pins in. It just happened that in explaining this on the video I didn't do that, but put the spring back in there for the check pin, and then put the check pin back in there. And then if you're not using a plug holder, just push that check pin up in there and push the key in. You have to hold it so the key will grab it and hold it in there. So you see now the key has it. The key's holding it in there so that we can go ahead and put it back together. You see, I'll put the tail piece on it, but you can see that the Everest 29 key is backward compatible, and you can key these Everest keys that have these check pins in them. Okay, so it's all back together. Put the tail piece back on it. See, it works that lock, and then it will work our Everest 29 lock. Same key. You can also take an Everest 29 key and work an Everest Primus lock, but you'll have to have an Everest 29 Primus to work an Everest Primus. The key will go in here, but being that this is not a Primus key, it does not have the side milling for Primus, it will not work the Primus lock. So if we want to go backwards compatible for a Primus lock, we have to have a Primus key blank to start with. So we need an Everest 29 Primus if we want to work an Everest Primus. Now, if you do have to drill one of these locks, it's going to take 2 holes. We're going to have to drill in the normal spot for the top pins, and then we're going to have to drill at 3 o'clock to take out the sidebar. So another option would be to try to get in the building some other way and then get the lock off the door and then shim this plug out. If we take the cap off the back, the only thing that holds the plug in there is the regular pin stack, the 6 pins that we normally work with. The sidebar doesn't hold the plug in the lock cylinder. It simply keeps it from turning. So if we were able to shim these 6 pins just like normal, we can push the plug out. Now, one problem is, of course, we're not going to be able to rotate it, so the holes in the plug are going to continue to be lined up underneath the holes in the lock cylinder. And we're going to have to just deal with that, but that's what I prefer to do. Now, if I can't get into the building any other way, I would prefer to drill the bolts. These are the bolt holes here that hold the lock housing, and I've covered this in course number 7 that we could just drill the bolts out and then get the lock out, and then we could buy a new housing, which is going to be cheaper than buying a new Primus lock cylinder. So those are some things that we need to consider. And I'm going to go ahead and shim this lock open. Okay, we have the Primus lock in a vise here, and we're going to try to get the shim stock in. I'm going to try my rake pick to see if I can get got number 6 there. See if we can get those, at least a couple of them like that. I think we got 2 there. Okay, I believe we might have 3. Now I will tell you, this is where we normally start having trouble out with these locks, is that with it being so tight that after I get 3, it normally has a lot of resistance, and the stock, of course, wants to bend. But we'll get this out of here. Okay, so if we can't get it to move forward by picking, right now I'm just raking. Okay, there we got one more there. I believe we got 4 of them done. We're going to try, see if we can move it ahead. Okay, we got one more. Now what's going to happen if we get all 6? The plug will move forward. As I said, it won't, we can't turn the plug because of that sidebar, but it will still come out. And I believe I got it right there. I believe I have all 6. I'm going to just give it a little push. Now we must only have 5 of them. So let's try to get the last one. Okay, I guess I don't have too much shim stock left to get a hold of there, but maybe we can get enough pressure on it to go ahead and push that. Okay, I got it. It's out. You can see that the plug is out a little bit. So now I'm going to take it back to the desk so we can get a better picture and go ahead and take it apart and not lose all of our pins. We have our plug shim that is coming out, and then all we have to do is just continue to push it out. Now, if we don't want our top pins, of course, to come out, we need to use a follower. Just put it right up underneath the shim stock and carefully give it a little push. Now your finger pins are going to come out. So if you want to keep them in order, you may be able to do that if you pay attention as they come out. Here you can see the sidebar sliding out. And I'm going to just turn it around here so I can see them. Here's one of the finger pins. Of course, that would be the first one. and there's a spring. Here's the second one coming out. And I'll just line those up as they come out in order. Here's the third one coming out. Of course, you know how to decode the key at this time, and if they got mixed up, you'd be able to figure out where they go if you want to put them back for the same key. So there's number 4 and 5. Here's the sidebar. And of course, it has its 2 little springs we want to watch for if we don't want to lose those. And that's it. That's all there is to getting it apart. The bottom pins are still in the plug. The top pins are still in the lock. And we can do whatever we need to do if it's, again, if it's a lost key, if they have the credentials for this lock, we could reorder another key. And if they don't have the credentials, we may have to just replace the lock. We may have to replace the lock temporarily while we get the right key with the right side bitting. Now, if they don't have a lot of other locks with that same side bitting, we can just put a new lock in and rekey the few locks that are there to fit the new lock. So there's several choices that you have when working with a lost key situation. If they have a lot of locks, of course, hopefully the information's available for the existing key, and you'll be able to replace that key. But you will need the code off of the key or off of the credentials in order to know what the side bitting was for that key. And actually, that's not totally true. We could take these pins and we could figure out the side bitting, couldn't we, for the key? But we wouldn't have the code for the side bitting. And to order the key, they're going to want the actual code. As we can see from this reference guide, Schlage has 10 different categories or series of locks. And now these are commercial locks, mechanical locks that are available. We're not talking about electronic locks in this course. They have a large number of electronic locks that are also available. I want to take just a couple of minutes to review what they have available and also review some of the terminology. One of the easiest ways to think about the Schlage locks is to divide them up by either tubular, cylindrical, deadbolts, and then mortise locks. And I want to just go over this general information, and then we'll look at this more specifically. The tubular locks, the CS200, and S200, are light to medium duty. None of these are grade 1 locks. 2 of these are interconnected. The CS200 and the S200 are interconnected locks. And we're going to go over that term in just a minute. Then they have 5 locks in the cylindrical group, A, H, AL, D, and ND. These are medium to heavy duty locks. 2 of them are grade 1, D and ND. 1 is interconnected, the H series lock. They have deadbolts, which they put in the B series, and in the B series they have 1 grade 1 and they have 1 grade 2. And the last category that we're going to look at would be the mortise lock, which is the L series, and this would be their most heavy duty lock. Now the questions that we need to ask ourselves as we're looking at buying one of these locks, the first question would be, what function does the lock need to be? Do you need an entrance lock, a passage lock, a storage room lock? What function do we need? Second, how strong of a lock do we need? Do we need a grade 1 lock? If we need a grade 1 lock, that's going to narrow us down to series B, D, ND, and then the mortise lock L. And then it's the third question I had here. Do you really need a mortise lock? Is that what the door is prepped for? And then you know you're dealing with a Series L lock. Do you need a lever handle lock? Today, in commercial environments, to deal with the ADA requirements, most locks are lever handle. But you need to look and see what the specific requirements are. Does the lock need to be interconnected? Which lock cylinder do you need? Do you need the Primus XP, the Everest 29, the 437 rating? Do you need an interchangeable core lock? And then the last question I had to pose, what trim and finish do you need for the lock? So those are the things that questions that you would ask as you're trying to make a selection. And if you go through this, you can narrow it down pretty quickly to which lock you need to be looking at. Okay, some of the terminology, the tubular lock set, definition, a bored lock set, in other words, you have to drill a hole, whose latch or bolt locking mechanism is contained in the component installed in the edge bore. So the locking mechanism is going to go through the 1-inch hole in the edge of the door, the edge bore. This is a tubular lock. Here we have the locking mechanism that goes through the edge hole or the edge bore in the edge of the door, and then the other part of the lock that goes through the face of the door slides through it and they interlock together. That's called a tubular lock. A cylindrical lock set, again a bored lock set, so we're going to drill a hole, whose latch or bolt locking mechanism is contained in the component installed through the crossbore. So with the cylindrical lock, the locking mechanism is going to go through the larger hole, the 2 1/8 inch hole, which is standard, in the face of the door, which is known as the crossbore. This is a cylindrical lock. The latch goes into the edge of the door, but the locking mechanism is inside the chassis here that goes through the crossbore. And we've covered these at many places in the course, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, that as the lock mechanism slides through the crossbore, it's going to engage the ears on the latch that slides into the edge bore. So that would be a cylindrical lock. Cylindrical locks are considered to be stronger than tubular locks. Mortise locks are even considered to be more heavy duty than the cylindrical locks. This is a 2 3/8 inch back set here. The hole here is the crossbore hole. It's a 2 1/8 inch hole. And then there's a 1-inch hole bored on the edge called the edge bore. And this is commonly referred to as a Prep 160 as opposed to a 161, which is a 2 3/4 inch back set. This is a Door Prep 161. You can see that it has the 2 3/4 inch back set. The hole's still the same as the 160. It's a 2 1/8 inch hole here, and then a 1-inch hole for the edge bore. But the big hole is the cross bore, and the edge bore is from the edge of the door, bored in from the edge. Now I want to show you drawing from a hardware supplier where they have labeled these cutouts differently. This large hole they've called a bore hole, and the other hole going through the edge of the door they have called a cross bore. This is a hardware supplier, and this is information that they are using to talk about the holes in the door. So that's not the normal terminology that locksmiths use. And one more term we want to review, interconnected. And again, this is a lock set whose trim provides a means to simultaneous retraction of 2 or more bolts, which may also be operated independently. So you could lock 2 or more locks independently, but they could all be unlocked with one movement. Normally turning the handle releases all of the locks. Okay, coming back to the reference guide, just to quickly show you these locks. The tubular locks are these three categories here, the CS200, the S series, and the S200. And you can see that two of those are interconnected locks. And then we have one just regular lever handle lock here. In the cylindrical locks, start off with this A series of lock. This A series of lock has been in production basically since 1927. This is the same basic design that Schlage got his company started with. And it is a grade 2 lock, but it's a very durable lock. At the end of the course, there's a bonus section that deals with the history of Schlage and the history of this A series lock. The H series lock is cylindrical lock. It's not rated as either grade 1 or grade 2, but it is an interconnected lock. Moving on, if you need a good lever handle lock and you can get by with grade 2, the AL series is the way to go. If you need a grade 1, go to the ND series. Also in grade 1, the D series, a knob style lock. Again, grade 1, very, very high quality material. And of course, the most durable of the locks, the mortise lock, is the L series. And then aside from that, you have your deadbolts, which are in the B series, and you have one grade 1 and one grade 2 lock here. So those are basically the 10 categories or series of mechanical locks that Schlage has in production. Now they have other locks. They have the electronic locks that we're not covering in this course, and then they have the residential locks. For lighter duty residential type environment, Schlage is offering the F series of locks. And notice that it comes with a 5-pin C keyway only. It does not come with the other lock cylinders, and the cylinder plug and shell are made of zinc. Now that doesn't mean that you can't put the other locks on residential doors. There are many of the A series and the D series locks that have been installed in residences. So those are available if a person wants a better quality lock. The F series is a tubular lock. In the reference guide, you will find a chart like this for each one of the series of locks that tells which cylinders can go to that lock. And for an example here, it says 6-pin conventional cylinder is a standard cylinder, and it gives the Schlage part number for that cylinder. And if you want a Primus or a Primus XP, and then if you want to go to the UL rating, it gives the UL rating, and again, of course, the Schlage part number for those cylinders. So you can see all of the different choices that are available. If you have a thicker door, the door is larger than 2 inches, then you need to look at cylinders for those types of doors. Okay, now just to review all of these different classifications and features of the locks, I want to turn to a page in the Schlage manual and just kind of review everything that we went over. Okay, so Schlage recognizes the classic lock as basic security, and they primarily recommend that for residential application. Now you can get the classic with the Primus XP, and at that point they call it a high security lock. And we've already seen the features in the XP, and so we know it, of course, is going to be a lot more security. You can also get classic with the 437 rating, which means that it has added the drill resistant pins to the lock. Now, one of the great features about being able to add Primus XP to the classic lock is that you can right away give a customer protection against unauthorized key duplication, because the Primus XP is patented through 2024 and requires authorization to make that key. Plus, as you remember, all of the side millings are cut at the factory. Okay, again, with Everest 29, we have several choices. You can go with standard security. You could go with restricted keyways. And then you can go with the XP, Everest XP. And then you can improve that even further by going with the Everest XP with the 437 locks. Looking in Schlage's manual of key control, I want to just point out that you need to be familiar with these different levels of ownership as far as rights with the keys. And here they say levels and exclusivity. For the classic Primus XP, for the Locksmith, there's levels 1, and then level 1 plus, and then level 2. And these do require buy-ins of product. The more you spend, the more product you buy, the higher level of dealership you can get. If an end user wants control over the product, they can buy in and become a level 3 or a level 4 end user. Everest 29 Primus XP. For the Locksmith, there's 2 levels, levels 7 and levels 8. And then for the end user, there's a level 9. The level 7 there is currently a $7,500 buy-in to get a level 7 dealership to be with the Everest 29 Primus XP. But notice that it says, owned and stocked by the dealers, resold to the end user. The keys bear a unique dealer ID based upon the 3-digit zip code exclusivity of side bit milling. So you at this level would have control over this product, and the end user would have to come back to you for additional product. Okay, I did a search for Schlage D-Series locks, and it's about the 7th or 8th link down. I can see that it has the Allegion website. So if we click on that, that will take us to the D-Series of locks. Okay, so now we're on the Allegion website, and we're on the page that deals with their D-Series of locks. And you can see here that it has overview, styles, downloads, key systems, and options. And if we just go to the downloads and click on that, we'll see the service manual, D-Series knobs service manual. It'll be on the either the Schlage website or the Allegion website. This is on the Allegion website where this took us to find this particular manual. But you'll find a detailed manual. I want to go over some specific parts of this service manual, just to make you aware of some of the information that you will find in here. You can see that it starts out with a couple of notes about the history of the lock. This particular series of lock has been made since 1940 and talks about their identification, that the locks are identified with the symbol MD40 stamped on the lock housing. I'm going to zoom in on the index here, and we can see the different locks by function. The DS10 is a passage latch. Then there's a few that are discontinued. The D25D is an exit lock. And there will be an exploded view of the lock showing all the parts of each one of these. And I'm going to look at the D53PD entrance lock. Okay, this is the exploded view of the D53PD, the entrance lock. And again, it shows the parts here with this exploded view of all the parts of the lock. You can see that it shows the schematic for the entrance lock, and then it gives a description of how the lock operates. And then again, just zooming in a little bit so you can see how the parts are numbered. And they have one of these, again, exploded views for each one of the different types of locks by function, as I was showing you on the index page. And I'm not going to go over all of them. They're all basically the same type of schematic. Just want to point out one of the parts, and we'll look it up on the parts list. Number 4 is the knob. So if we go to the parts list, number 4 we see is the open knob. And with this lock, the D53PD, which is here, we can see that that lock uses 2 of those components. So they have the schematic number, then they have the Schlage part number, then they have a description, and they have the locks across the top of the chart by function number. And so you can look and see which parts go to which locks. Very easy to pick out the parts you would need if you need to order parts. This page talks about the strikes and the latches available for the different locks. You can see that it's showing 3 different latches, and then it gives information on the dimensions and so on of the latches. And it looks at the strikes, and again, dimensions for the strikes. The designs or trim packages are on this page. These are the ones that are available for the D-Series lock. And an interesting note here, there is a retrofit lever handle. As you know, many companies are being forced to put in lever handle locks to comply with ADA requirements. And so if they have this D-Series lock and it's in good working condition, instead of replacing the lock, you can order the retrofit lever to put on that lock. Okay, this page talks about finishes. And again, we talked about finishes in our courses on commercial locks, but these are the finishes that are available for the D-Series lock. This page also covers the tactile warning finish that is available. They have one that's called knurling, and then they have one that's called abrasive. And with both, it's kind of a rough feeling on the knob, so as to warn people that you're entering a room that's different. This knob is different, and when you touch it, it's going to feel different to you, so that you'll know that you may be entering a room that you shouldn't go in if you're not sure what's in there. It could be electrical hardware, or it could be chemicals, or something that the owners of the building are just saying that be careful when you enter this room. This page talks about the tools that are available to work on and service the D-Series of locks. They have a kit of tools. They also mention that a 5-inch back set is available. Standard back set's 2 3/8 or 2 3/4, but every now and then you'll come across a door that the back set is 5 inches, and that is available. They have a reinforcement kit. If you're going to do a hollow metal door, it needs to be reinforced. And also the spanner wrench is necessary to service these locks. It goes into installation instructions. And so if you have any question about how to install the lock or take it back off, you could look at this page, and it's going to give you some ideas about how it was put on there. Next page is the same, continues on with installation instructions. And then if you need to change the handing of the door to keep what you need to do to keep the lock in the right position, it explains that to you. Then it also talks about the interchangeable core locks. There's a page that talks about the keyways and what's available for master keying. Talks about the keyways that are available. Says that C, E, E, F, and F are available for you to buy for these locks. And then it talks about they have restricted keyways. That if there's a need for a restricted keyway, you can contact Schlage, and if it's a large enough order, they may be interested in giving you a restricted keyway. Then there's a page on ordering and what information you need to order these locks. And they have 13 different things to look at. I'm not going to go through this and read these to you, but it has to do with finishes and back sets and door handling and the common things that you would expect when ordering a lock. And then they actually do an example of a lock, and then they talk about their warranty. So that's the service manual for the D-Series lock. And like I say, these are available for all of the different categories of locks that, in fact, that most manufacturers make. Most manufacturers have these available. Now, we've been more focused on the commercial locks that Schlage offers, but they do have manuals for their residential series of locks. The F Series, FFA, and FB Series is also available. That concludes this course on Schlage mechanical locks. As a way of review and practice, try to obtain as many of the locks as you can that we covered in this course. Take them apart and see what they're made of. Go online to the Allegiant and Schlage websites and look at all of the information available there. Download and review other service manuals. Both Everest 29 and Primus XP are patent protected with utility patents. A utility patent is normally good for 20 years from the date of application. Everest 29 is protected until 2029 and Primus XP is protected until 2024. By knowing how to work with these locks, you can offer your customers the benefits of the locks and the patents. Installing lock systems like these can often create a lifetime customer. As I have said before, much of what you learn about one manufacturer will help you to understand others. Specifically in the case of the Schlage Primus and Primus XP, much of what you learned will also apply to the combi locks made by ASA. Those locks also use a similar type of finger pin and sidebar. This is the Schlage M45 lock. It was first made in 1948. Has a wafer-style lock cylinder in it. This was a very popular lock. It was used in single-family homes, multi-family complexes, and it was used in office buildings and for light commercial use. So there were millions of this type of lock installed. It's very similar to a lock that Schlage first produced in 1927, and it's basically identical to the Schlage A series of lock, which is still in production today. The basic design made such an impact on the door hardware world. I think it's worth knowing a little bit of its history. I'm going to make use of information I've obtained from Schlage's website and other places on the internet to present some facts about the history of this lock and the Schlage company. Walter Reinhold Schlage was the first person to patent and successfully produce a push-button cylindrical lock. Walter Schlage was born, raised, and educated in Germany. He studied drafting, applied mechanics, and engineering at the Carl Zeiss Optical Works in Jena, Germany. He came to San Francisco in 1905 at the age of 23 and accepted employment with the Western Electric Company. Walter Schlage's first invention, patented in 1909, was a door lock that had the ability to turn the lights to the room on and off simply by turning the knob. From this work, he became interested in developing a simpler door lock, and in 1910 he patented a lock which operated by pushing or pulling the doorknob. In 1916 he developed a lock that could be unlocked by tilting the knob. Schlage was also awarded 2 patents for electrical doorbells, one in 1911 and one in 1913. Schlage left the Western Electric Company in 1920 and opened a shop in San Francisco where he developed tools for manufacturing the first lock with a push-button device centered in the doorknob. The Schlage Lock Company was incorporated with a starting capital of only $30. Schlage wanted to design a lock that was simpler to use and easier to install than the mortise top lock that was in common use at the time. He had the idea for a design that could be installed by drilling only 2 holes in a door. On April 12, 1920, he applied for his first cylindrical-shaped door lock patent. This patent described the lock, which was constructed by assembling the knob, spindle, and latch retractor into one self-contained unit within a circular housing. The body of the lock hooked onto the retractable latch unit. Rotating either knob retracted the latch, and that patent was issued on May 22, 1923. Before the patent was even issued, Schlage had applied for another patent in October of 1920. This patent described the lock of cylindrical construction with a locking mechanism operated by pushing a button in the center of the interior knob to lock and by rotating the interior knob to unlock. The plunger attached to the push button engaged a spindle on the opposite side which would hold the exterior knob in the locked position. This was the basic design of the Schlage cylindrical push-button lock set we know today. The patent for the push-button door lock was issued on April 8, 1924. By the end of 1923, the original push-button lock dies were ready, and assembly line construction of the A-lock began at a new factory in San Francisco. By 1925, the company was manufacturing 20,000 locks per month. Originally, it did not have a key lock, and it was used on interior doors where it replaced mortise locks, which took longer to install. Schlage's first push-button door locks did not have an exterior key cylinder. They were designed for interior use. On May 9, 1923, a patent was filed for a key-activated, rotatable tumbler lock. This was the first design of the A-series key and lock mechanism. This cylinder was used until 1927, when Schlage introduced the 7-tumbler wafer cylinder you see here. Here you can see a drawing of the rotatable key lock. Now if we come back to our M45 lock, we can see that this lock contains the features that were described in the 2 patents from 1920. The first patent says that a lock constructed by assembling a knob, spindle, and latch retractor, which would be here, into one self-contained unit with a circular housing. That's exactly what we have right here. Then the second patent from October of 1920 goes on to say a mechanism with a pushing a button in the center of a knob to lock it. And here's your push button lock, of course, that we're all familiar with. It says the plunger attached to the push button engaged a spindle on the opposite side, holding the exterior knob in the lock position. We can also see in the M45 lock basically the same exact wafer lock cylinder that was produced in 1927. Here's the key. Here you can see the key. We can compare that to the one in the drawing from the original patent. This is the Schlage wafer style lock, 7 wafers. In 1927, to help ensure the success of his business, Schlage partnered with a San Francisco businessman and financier, Charles Kendrick. In 1940, Walter Schlage was honored and received the Modern Pioneer Award for Outstanding American Inventors. Walter Schlage died in 1946. In the 1950s, the company began a period of expansion by acquiring other companies. It acquired California Lock Company, Peabody, and LCN Closers to give Schlage a more complete range of hardware offerings. In the 1970s, the Schlage Company expanded once again by purchasing the mortise lock manufacturing company, General Lock Company of Pontiac, Michigan. In 1974, Schlage was acquired by Ingersoll Rand. As a result of the acquisition, Schlage became part of the Ingersoll Rand Door Hardware Group. Expansion continued under Ingersoll Rand, and in 1975, Schlage acquired lock manufacturing facilities in New Zealand. In 1976, a new plant was opened in Security, Colorado. Today, that plant still produces 6 of the standard series of lock sets, as well as handcrafted door hardware products. In 1997, Schlage relocated its administrative offices from San Francisco to Colorado Springs. Technical services and customer services still remain in San Francisco, California. In 2013, Schlage and the other Ingersoll Rand security technology companies were spun off into a new company that's called Allegion. At the time we're making this video, these are the current brands under the Allegion Corporation. That concludes this video. We want to thank you for buying this video. We hope you found it informative. Please visit our website at www.locksmithdvd.com and review our other videos.